Hi, my name's Drew, and I'm calling from Wisconsin.
Hey, Drew from Wisconsin. How are you doing today?
Good.
Thanks for calling in. What would you like to talk about?
I'm a men's rights activist.
Okay,
I'd
cool.
like to talk about men's rights.
Great. So what would you like to bring up? What would you like to discuss?
We could talk about rape, for instance. Lots of male inequality.
Okay, sure. I'm assuming you're calling in because you disagree with something, or you wanted to in that topic, or you wanted to refute something that we have covered on this show.
Just pick one of those two things and get specific.
Yeah, let's talk about something specific. It could be whatever you'd like.
Let's talk about rape then. I mean, about how men are excluded from being rape victims.
How so?
Well, for instance, according to the definition by the FBI, until 2013, men weren't included at all. And after 2013, there's still men who are forced to penetrate other people are not considered rape victims.
That is true about the FBI definition of rape. It wasn't until a few years ago that their definition of rape included the forcible, non-consensual penetration of a man. And I know for a fact that there were groups, women's groups, feminist groups out there who were very much at the forefront of that push to get that definition to be changed.
That's fine, but it doesn't change the fact that the male victims were not considered rape victims. Whether women's groups or women in general helped to change the FBI's definition is really irrelevant to the victims.
Well, number one, yes, I agree with you that it was very wrong for that the FBI definition did not include men until very recently. And I also agree with you that there is in society a stigma of the male rape victim. And I would like to add, though, that the majority of these rapes that occur against men are usually within the confines of prison. And they're usually being raped by other men.
That's absolutely not true. While it does matter, first of all, you go into another issue of why are 93% of the people in prison male. That doesn't make any sense because 93% of the crimes are not committed by men. So having such a high, population of men in prison is going to lead to more male rape in prison. But that's kind of a faux pas, really. By the CDC's 2010 study, if you include the men who are forced to penetrate women or other men, then you actually get around a 40% male rape victim number.
Okay.
And 40 to 50%. And on top of that, there's a 2008 Bureau of Justice Statistic study that showed about around 50% of children in sex trafficking in New York City are boys.
Okay, but
I
who's...
just need to jump in for
Okay,
just
go
1
ahead,
second,
Michael.
and then I want you to go ahead. Can I just
Go ahead,
just
go ahead.
asking clarifying question because you're just this is really unfocused.
I mean, we
right
don't
now.
have the numbers in front of us, so we're going completely by what you're telling us is accurate information. I can't dispute what you're saying because I don't have those numbers that you have in front of you in front of me.
I would definitely dispute some things off the top of my head, but regardless of what I'm saying is, first of all, and Matt will elaborate on all of this, but I just have to say, Number one, you're conflating a bunch of different issues together. So the crisis of male rape in prison has a lot more to do with, are you interested in prison reform? Are you interested in racism? Are you interested in the prison industrial complex? Secondly, those numbers you're throwing around about almost equivalent rates of women raping men versus men raping women,
those numbers
are totally implausible. I've never seen them reported in any serious place. And number three, you still haven't explained what any of this has to do with being a so-called men's rights activist versus a prison reform activist, as an example.
Well, okay. First of all, about being a men's rights activist or a prison reform activist, those don't necessarily have to be separate. I mean, if 93% of the prison population is male and you want to reform prisons, then you'd be a men's rights activist because you're fighting for men's issues, because men are predominantly impacted by this issue, and you're also fighting to reform prisons. So you're actually both. You don't have to pick one or the other.
Go ahead, Michael.
And on the other one, about the 50%, 40 to 50% statistics, that comes from the CDC, which feminists in general love to cite because it was done by Mary Koss, who is clearly a feminist.
Wait, hold on. Let me just
irresponsible.
Let me just butt in here for a second, because I'm not quite sure what this. I understand you're calling in to give me the statistics that you have on male rape and rape in prison and who's committing the crimes that put people in prison, etc. I'm not quite understanding what your point of the call is, though, that you're trying to refute us with. Are you what makes you a men's rights activist? Like, why are you calling in to give us this information? Like, why are you a men's rights activist?
What makes somebody a men's rights activist, by definition, is someone who is an advocate for men's rights.
Okay.
It's really that simple. And then, can we go back to your show from yesterday?
Sure.
Where you brought up, you talked about the red pill woman. And this is confusing different groups, which I see done quite often. You have MGTOWs, which is the MGTOW group, and then you have red pillars, and then you have MRAs. MRAs are the people who want to change the system because they think it's broken. They work within it to change it. Red pillars are people who see the system and think that it might work against them, but they're going to work within it to get the most out of it. And MGTOWs are the people who just refuse to use the system at all and hope that generally they hope that changes the system. These are the people who often refuse to, get married and oftentimes even stop dating women. So those are the different groups, and there is overlap. There's also
now you're giving a very kind G-rated definition to these terms. Because, I mean, if you go online and you search a men's rights activist or a red pill movement forum, or you go on an MGTOW website, I mean, you're basically giving an argument that, oh yeah, I'm white pride because I just love white heritage. I'm not racist. But if you go online and Google white pride or search white pride is inherently a racist thing. It's not just proud of being white, it's proud of the racism and the hatred and the systematic supremacy and abuse that white people have given throughout history. Now, if you go online and see men's rights activism, you see men attacking women, you see men attacking feminism, you see this, that. Men shouldn't have to pay for this, their child if they leave their woman, and the woman they should have to pay alimony to their wife if they get a divorce or whatever. You're giving a very G-rated term. I mean, you go on the men going their own way forum. That's the MGTOW. I don't see these guys not talking about women. In fact, these guys who want to go their own way and ostensibly not have anything to do with women, all they do is complain and talk about bitches and sluts and whatever, and there's no such thing as rape culture. I mean, you're giving a frankly bullshit definition to these things. I mean, is that maybe the dictionary term? If you were to just look up what that means, I don't even know if you could argue that, but okay. But what I see and what the majority of people see when they go online and they see men's rights, they're not seeing, yeah, I care about men being raped, and the FBI didn't have that in the definition until 2013. I don't see them, men's rights activists, when you type in men's rights or red pill or whatever, I don't see them going, the prison industrial complex is screwed up. We need to do something about it. We need to take action for these men, stop and frisk, etc. Issues that do affect men, although I don't believe that the majority of these issues affect men because they are men. But regardless, okay, I don't think you're giving a very clear picture of what the men's rights activism movement is.
Okay, so you have these preconceived notions of who men's rights activists are, and, again, you conflate it together, MGTOWs and MRAs who oftentimes severely disagree with each other. And so it's important, and I would agree that there are more.
This isn't a fringe feud, though. I mean, this is, for example, I had seen yesterday when you were trying to call. When you were trying to call on the show yesterday,
it's an entirely different group, Matt.
Okay, let's say it's an entirely different group. Okay, let's say it's an entirely different group, and that's not all men's rights activists. You said yesterday when you tried to call in, I had noticed you posted an article you wrote for A Voice for Men on our Majority Report YouTube live stream. What was the title of that article you wrote for A Voice for Men? Which I would like everyone to know that's Paul Elam's website, which is the leading men's rights activist website. It is the MRA guidebook there. That what's being posted on there is basically what the men's rights activism movement's mainstream viewpoint is. Regardless of whether MRAs agree, it is easily the most popular. What was the name of your article?
My article was about how there's a statistic out there that 3 females attempt suicide for every male, and that's a myth. That's what my article was about. And 80% of suicides are male, and then what they do is they take all the people who go to hospitals for any self-harm. We're talking about people who pierce their skin, and they count these as attempted suicides. And I'm not saying that these statistics don't matter, but when you're talking about, when you're combining people who pierce their skin with people who are attempting to kill themselves, that's a big problem. And it really hides the fact that, the problem with men. And that's my issue. And, the CDC was cited as a statistic. I called the CDC. They couldn't find it. I talked to an expert who asked me where I got this information and couldn't find.
But why? What's with the? Okay, I think it's great that you would like to correct a false statistic, but within the men's rights activist world, what do you get out of making a big deal about? Apparently, it is 100% true. This is not false. That more women attempt suicide or self-harm than men. That it's 100% true. That is not false. That is not a wrong statistic. However, it is also true. Continue. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, it comes down to like a 55-45% ratio, not a 300% more statistic. That there's a severe difference there, and it changes how we should attack the problem when you know the accurate facts. And this is what an MRA
Well, I mean, the accurate facts to me show, but by your statistics, the accurate facts show to me that there is still a substantial amount more women who attempt suicide or who actually self-harm than men. And I mean, that's just what you found yourself, too.
Well, my article wasn't taking on attempted suicide as a whole. It was taking on the statistics because there are a lot of male attempted suicides and suicides that aren't even included, like a man who drives off the road and kills himself in a single-person car accident. That's not considered an attempted suicide or suicide. And
you know what? If that's true, I agree that should be considered attempted suicide. However, if you're saying that that's not considered an attempted suicide, then it's also not considered an attempted suicide for women. So I don't see how this is a men's only an issue that predominantly affects men.
Well, because more men, the way men see this.
I mean, you said yourself that you found yourself that while, and again, I'm just going by your statistics. I don't have any information in front of me to refute what you're saying. You found for yourself that while you believe that the numbers are inflated a bit, you did find that there are more women who attempt suicide or who actually self-harm than men.
There are more women who self-harm than men. That is true, and I'm not against. See, men's rights activists aren't against women having problems. Women do have problems, and they do need to be taken on. We do need to realize that more women commit self-harm, but we do not need to falsify the facts and blow the facts way out of proportion in a way that.
But what does trying to prove that slightly less women try to kill themselves? What does proving that slightly less women try to kill themselves? What does that do to further the cause to make society care more about men who attempt suicide? That's what I'm failing to understand.
Okay, because there's how you attack these problems matters, whether depending on what sex is doing them. Because women and men will commit suicide in different ways or attempt suicide in different ways. And for instance, men predominantly use weapons and things like that. And so by saying, hey, there aren't 3 female suicides to every suicide attempt, to every male suicide attempt, maybe we need to attack this problem differently.
Your data didn't show that there's an enormous amount of men not being counted and that it trumps the number of women. Your data that you said you did simply found that slightly less women, but still more than men, try to commit suicide. I don't see how that would affect what you're trying to affect more than just going out there and writing an article about the actual issues that affect men that force them to commit suicide, that force them to try to commit suicide. For example, a lot of men who try to commit suicide are suffering from PTSD from being overseas in war. What I think would have been much more helpful would be doing an article about PTSD and how veterans are ignored because of things like the Republican Party, who choose not to pass bills that get them the proper mental health care, and then that's what ends up happening. It has nothing to do with them being men. It has nothing to do with them being some sort of movement out there that's saying we want men to kill themselves. What's happening is that society is not taking this seriously because these things were already injected in their head from something that a lot of men's rights activists don't believe exists, called the patriarchy, which feminism movements try over and over again to say, I know you don't like hearing the word patriarchy, but the feminist movements have constantly tried to knock down the patriarchy, change that society view on it. And you know what? A lot of ways that would help men. If the patriarchy didn't exist, you wouldn't have men being forced to be seen as, we have to be the tough guys who have to go off to war. We have to be the sole breadwinner of the family, even though thankfully that isn't happening as much anymore. In fact, many women are the breadwinners now. So hopefully that's actually affecting the male suicide rate. And you know what? That might be actually pumping up the female attempted suicide rate from women. So, I mean, I understand that you're worried about men's suicide rates, but you're going about it completely wrong.
I care about a lot of different men's rights issues,
but I want to get to one thing though. Before I definitely want you to call in again. We'll have to do this again. We hit more than one topic and we went really long. But the reason I brought up your article is I want to point this out. You argued that men's rights activism, you gave a definition, is just people who care about men's rights. And it's not this hate movement that's out there. And you yourself, Dean, from Wisconsin, you're from Wisconsin, correct?
I agree with what?
You're from Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, I'm from Wisconsin.
Dean from Wisconsin, the men's rights activists, wrote an article for A Voice for Men, the leading men's rights activism website, which you said just cares about men's rights issues, and it's not a hate movement that attacks and women and is an anti-feminism movement and is just seeping with misogyny. I go to your article and I look at the top comments on your article for A Voice for Men. And these are comments from people who frequent avoiceformen.com. These are men's rights activists. You can say they're just commentators, but this isn't Huffington Post. This isn't NBC News. This isn't even Fox News that hits a mainstream, broad amount of people. This is a specific website for men's rights activists, frequented by men's rights activists. They post with their own name. I could click their name and see their history of commenting on this website. These are the top comments on your article, trying to point out that in your words, that we should care more about men committing suicide. Fake attempting suicide.
So you care more.
Fake attempting suicide.
Okay, man, so you care.
Fake attempting suicide by women. They make sure they will get help fast and only use less efficient method of suicide is quite common. Another example where men are more successful in achieving a goal than women. That's them talking about men actually succeeding with killing themselves more than women. They're actually, that's someone who cares about men killing themselves. Here's another one. Good work hunting down another feminist woozle. Females perform suicide gestures.
You did a bait and switch here on me, Matt.
Females perform.
You did a bait and switch on me.
What? How did I do a bait and switch on you? Females perform suicide gestures in order to get attention. Men try to kill themselves. These are men's rights activists proudly using men who commit suicide. These are men.
You baited with my article and you switched with the commenters. Okay, so I was correcting a truth.
All right, you're correcting I'm not attacking your article where you found out, you broke the news that slightly less women try to commit suicide, but still more than men, and somehow this is trying to, in your words, change how people perceive male suicide, which I don't get, to be honest with you. I don't think you proved that in your article at all. But
80% of the suicides are male. That's not slightly less, Matt. 93% of those in prison are male. That's not slightly less.
I agree that men actually succeed more than women in killing themselves, if you want to use the word succeed, which is being used on your men's rights activist website on your own article by the commenters. But there are reasons for that. And it doesn't have to do with women being weak and not being able to go through with it and trying to get attention so they fake suicide. Actually, it's probably more so that men actually have access to...
Okay, let me address that point. The reason is because men feel completely powerless and they don't have places to go. Where's a man of domestic violence to go? When there's a YouTuber who was talking about his situation, and he was abused by his partner. He had a child. He accepted the abuse, and the mother went to throw the remote at the back of his head, hit the couch, hit their 2-year-old baby in the nose.
Listen. I agree with you. It's horrible. Domestic abuse, sexual violence, all of this is horrible when it happens to both
but the point
men and women.
That, let me make my point at least, is that when he finally got sick of it because he couldn't handle his baby being abused, he called the police, and the police gave the mother the child. He got arrested. And there aren't domestic violence shelters for him to go to.
So
that's not right.
Dean, two quick things, and then you got to call back. We've given you a lot of time. Number one, what Matt said earlier is exactly right, which is that the only reason you would ever, and it's a cultural joke. I'll admit, and it's embarrassing to admit, when I hear a story about a man getting physically abused by his wife or girlfriend, my first impulse is like, really? Is like, what is that about? But it's something that really does happen, and the only reason it's not taken seriously by authorities is exactly because of a system of patriarchy that absolutely reinforces certain roles, which means by definition, a man who gets abused by his wife is not a man, or it's embarrassing, or whatever else. And number two, all of the issues you've raised, including legitimate ones, are all economic. They're all
Yes.
prison. They're
No,
all
they're not.
and to the extent they're cultural, you
They're
should be,
social.
and to the extent they're social, you should be marching with the feminists, because they're the ones that want to shake up those definitions and actually allow for a more co-equal and humane thing. And you can pull quotes out and find things of different women and different people in the feminist politics saying things that you or I may disagree with, but fundamentally that is the mission of feminism. And what you guys are doing is you're empowering a disgusting backlash whose language and whose rhetoric justifies abuse and violence and rape and social regression, which not only is wrong to women, it absolutely will reinforce the things that you're concerned about. Male
How did I
suicide.
justify it?
I mean, I show.
That's- it
Listen, I
reinforces
show
it. He
you.
just showed
I just
you.
show you in your own article where you try to regardless of whether I feel you were succeeded at doing what you set out to do or not, you said you wrote that article to make people take male suicide rates and men committing suicide more seriously. And right there in your own article are men's rights
No, I wrote the
activists
article.
mocking the fact that men kill themselves. They are
No,
saying just
I
another
wrote this
thing men do
article
better than
to
women.
correct a
Just
falsehood.
The first,
I wrote the
the
article
first
to correct the
people, the
falsehood.
first
Okay,
people,
but
Dean,
even though
Dean,
that's what you set out to, that's what you set out to do. But regardless, in your own article where you set out to correct the falsehood for men, to help men, are men's rights activists in the comments making
so wrong about helping men?
a mockery
Nothing. You're changing the
of
subject.
men.
Dean,
making
Dean.
a mockery of men
Dean.
killing themselves.
Dean, if you look into the history,
Jeez.
which is a helpful thing to do, and this is the
Okay,
last thing.
hold-
This is the last. No, this is the last thing that's going to be said.
You
because
could call in again,
can
but we
call
gotta
in.
go now.
But this is
We
the
gave
last
you a
thing-
lot of
This is
time.
the last thing that's going to be said. If you go into the history of this, which is usually a helpful thing to do, it's amazing how many people write about things they don't know any history of. The first people that worked on issues like male suicide and issues like that were people that absolutely came from a feminist perspective, because it's a human rights issue that has implications for both genders, and that's where the real work is being done, not being resentful and hateful online. But you're welcome to call back anytime.